this is a topic that I think is probably something that I posted on my Instagram and Facebook page literally yesterday. This is why I'm doing this episode. And I have had more comments, more private messages than any other post I have ever done on social media. Now, if you're not following me on social media, please do so. I'm on Facebook as Caroline Strawson, and on Instagram, same thing, Caroline Strawson, Overcoming Narcissistic Trauma. And I post every day, twice a day. A lot of my posts are from the heart. A lot of them are educational, but equally I do share a lot about my own experiences and my own feelings. And this actually came about with something that I was really seeing a lot of people in my community say, and it's quite a sensitive topic, could be a triggering subject for some, but I really felt when I wrote the post I did on social media and was very vulnerable with this, that it was something that we need to talk about. And it can happen to men and women, but obviously predominantly in my community, it's women. And obviously I'm a woman, so I'm going to talk about it from my perspective. That doesn't mean though, that it doesn't happen for men either. And what I want to talk about in this episode is when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, and then the intimacy of that relationship goes away. And it goes away from your perspective. And in the social media post that I put out, I spoke about being frigid, being cold, being a prude, those kinds of terminologies and words that maybe the narcissist has said to you as well, because you're not engaging in intimate acts, having sex with the narcissist. You've got your walls up. It's the last thing on your mind. But there's an element of guilt coming up for you because you are feeling like maybe you are frigid, maybe you are cold, maybe you are a prude. And that can stay with you as well. And it can ripple out into other future relationships that you may have. And I really want to talk about this. It's an uncomfortable subject to talk about and maybe for you to listen to. But I really feel like one of the big things, one of my biggest passions is lifting shame and guilt from how you feel. And I think talking about my own experiences and indeed from an internal family systems and trauma-informed perspective, we can maybe start to look at your behavior in a different way, rather than somebody who is frigid, is cold, is a prude, withholding that intimacy with your narcissistic partner. We're going to look at it through a trauma-informed lens. Now, if you think about it, when you're in that relationship with a narcissist, whether you're married, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever that is, having a good sex life is part of that, that intimacy, that connection, right? And very often, maybe at the start of the relationship, it's great. But as you're in that relationship with a narcissist, over time, it can go one of two ways. And I'll do another episode on the other extreme of this. But in this particular episode, I want to talk about when you start to retreat, where you start to recoil, where you start to put up those walls, and the narcissist may want to be intimate with you and you're just kind of like, no. And the narcissist's reaction to that could be words like, you're cold, you're frigid, you're a prude. So I think it's really important that we talk about this so that you get to realize, I want you to start to think about that frigid part, the prude part, the isolating part, the cold part of you is actually a protector part. Now, I do a lot of internal family systems in the work I do on a one-to-one and in my communities, and certainly in my narcissistic trauma recovery program. We do a whole parts mapping lesson, and I always map the parts with my clients as well. And very often, frigidity, coldness, prudeness, not wanting to have that intimate time, sex with your partner will come up. And it comes up in a number of ways. One, how you feel about not wanting to be intimate with your partner. And the other side of that is feeling pressured that there's something wrong with me. Why don't I want to? All of those elements. And I want you to put on a different lens here, and we're going to look at this in a different way. So rather than thinking that it's something that you are consciously choosing not to do and consciously not wanting to get intimate, I want you to start to think about this as a part of you. You aren't frigid. You aren't a prude. You aren't cold. A part of you is showing up to protect you. But protect you from what? So when we talk about internal family systems, remember, we all have a core true self. That's where we want to be operating, living our life. But when we have self-worthiness wounds that have happened in our childhood, or exiles as we call them in IFS, what happens is we have parts of us that show up to try and distract us, soothe us, move us away from feeling that our system thinks would be even more painful. So whilst that you might be withholding those intimate moments from yourself and your narcissistic partner, you're actually doing that because that part of you is literally putting those walls up, not wanting to have that intimacy, because very often you're going to be in a freeze trauma response. And by freeze, your perception of the narcissist behavior is dangerous, it's threatening. And even if it's not actually life-threatening, I know in some cases it can be, and obviously that's when you need to seek other avenues of police, etc. But on the whole, it's not actually life-threatening. It's very painful and hurtful and abusive, but it's not actually a danger to your life. And that's how our system is set up from a primal perspective, that our system wants to keep us safe, keep us alive, and move us away from what it perceives to be the biggest pain. So if we are withholding that intimacy from our partner, why are we doing that? There must be something about the narcissist that our system perceives to be more dangerous, more painful, and that's why that protector part has stepped in to try and distract you, move you away from something that your system thinks would be even more painful for you to feel. Now, I'm going to use me as an example so that I can explain to you my situation. And again, I'm being really vulnerable here. It's an uncomfortable subject to talk about, but having shared it on social media, wow, I feel I need to talk about it. However uncomfortable I might feel about this, I feel like we need to talk about it because I really want to lift any shame and guilt you may feel about that. Now, my relationship with my ex-husband, and again, I'm not going to go into sort of the minutiae details of it all, but I do want to explain some of it, because then I think if you hear my version, my story with this, it will help you ascertain your version, your story, your journey in all of this. So when we had our son, I definitely had postnatal depression after we had our son. I didn't know it at the time. I only realized it actually after I had my daughter and got diagnosed with postnatal depression, realizing I actually had it after my son as well. Now, when I had my son, obviously he had really bad silent reflux. I was tired. My ex-husband used to work away a lot and was very disconnected from me. I'd always had conversations with him about connection and not feeling that connection with him. Didn't help with his job because he was away. He was cabin crew, so he was away a lot of the time as well. So it was almost like we were living this roller coaster, but predominantly the childcare was coming from me. So he was away. I was there on my own with our son. Then when he'd come back, there would be that disconnect. So again, our intimate life, even from when I gave birth, because I didn't feel good about myself for a start. Obviously, I'd put on 4 stone when I'd had my son as well, so I didn't feel good in myself. But there was no kind of nurturing from my husband around any of that too. So again, I was isolating myself because I felt really ugly. I felt disgusted at myself, and I just threw myself into being a mum. And rather than my husband, again, trying to support me in all of that, he was just away a lot of the time. So I was just kind of focusing on being a mum, and that was it. And then over time, obviously, we wanted to have a sibling. And really from about, my son was probably around 2. And really over the next 18 months, we were trying for a baby. And I could seem to get pregnant very quickly. But I kept having multiple miscarriages, to the extent actually we went to see a miscarriage specialist in London to find out, was there something wrong with me? Was there something wrong with my husband? My husband was on medication. Was that having something to do with it? And but there was no reason. So all my friends around me, when we had our first child together, were all now starting to have their second, and I was having miscarriages. So again, I was feeling pretty rubbish in myself. Sadly, not a lot of support from my husband at that particular time either. But again, being that codependent, being that empath, I'm still there. I'm still trying. I need to keep my family together. I need to make sure that we're not this broken home or anything, not actually realizing the bigger picture, but just really focusing on that. Eventually, I fell pregnant with my daughter. But 6 months into that pregnancy, I found out that my husband was having an affair. Now, this is all actually, if you actually go and Google my name, Caroline Strawson, you will actually see a magazine article come up in Bella magazine here in the UK. And because I used to be a counsellor for the Miscarriage Association at the time, anyone that knows me, I always like to give back. So I'd been through miscarriages and I wanted to give back. So I was actually a miscarriage counsellor. And the Miscarriage Association here in the UK asked me if Bella magazine could come and speak to me about the experiences of miscarriage and the implications that that can have on a relationship. It's like, yeah, sure. Anyway, they came to interview myself, and obviously my husband was there, and it all came out obviously about the affair. And again, this is all public knowledge. So I'm not sharing anything that isn't already out there. And obviously they interviewed myself and my husband at the time about really how miscarriages could really rock a relationship, which, you know, some of you may listen to right now and have been through miscarriages yourself, and it really does. And so they kind of interviewed us about it. And obviously we were still trying, even though obviously I'd had my daughter at that stage and I found out he'd had an affair. But we'd made that decision. We're going to keep trying, because obviously my husband had got upset and I'll never do this again. And again, you can read all of this in Bella magazine. You can see the article if you Google my name. And, you know, there's a little section on there directly from my ex-husband about saying what he did and how sorry he was and how he'd never do it again. All of this is out in the public domain. So when that article kind of came out, and then all of those emotions, literally from the moment of conception for my daughter, that was the last time I was ever intimate with my husband. And we split up when she was almost 3 years old. So, and he was sleeping in another room at that stage. I was obviously breastfeeding my son. And then with my daughter, again, she ended up with silent reflux. My husband was away a lot, didn't sleep much. So I co-slept with each baby. And it ended up that my husband at the time, he decided he would go and sleep in another room. Didn't really think too much of it at the time, because actually it suited me. I think it suited him as well. And that was kind of how we were rolling. We were kind of existing in the same house. He was going off to work, doing I don't know what. And I was just focusing on being a mom. And that intimacy was not there. And I didn't want it to be there. And could I have been classed as frigid and cold and a prude? Yeah, maybe. But at the end of the day, I was actually in a trauma response of functional freeze. So when I say functional freeze, I mean I was kind of being a mum, but I was in a freeze trauma response. My brain and body was not thinking at all as a priority of being intimate with my husband. I was in survival mode. And the reason why I was in survival and freeze was because my perception of my husband's behavior was, I'm not good enough. I'm worthless. I'm not lovable. I don't matter. And actually his behavior was highly triggering self-worthiness wounds within me that had come from my childhood. But his behavior was like ripping the scab off all of those. My version of danger, my version of the biggest pain. So my whole system was going into protection mode to isolate myself, freeze, dissociate, numb out, put the walls up, not to have sex with my partner, my husband, Literally, my whole system was set for survival. Nothing else was on the agenda. Not because I was this cold-hearted person and didn't ever want to do any of that with my husband, but because my perception of my husband's behavior was triggering my self-worthiness wounds, and I'd got the walls up. And at no stage did my husband try and help me with any of that. Actually, his behavior, and again, if you've read my book, Divorce Became My Superpower, you will know, just really perpetuated what I was feeling about myself all of the time. Language, behavior, words, all of these things. It was almost like he was constantly shining a light to me. You're worthless. You're not good enough. And this is how I'm going to behave. This is how I'm going to be. So it was just, I wanted to talk about this because this is you in a trauma response. Now, the interesting thing was, when I did this post on social media as well and shared all of this, shared stuff that's out in the public, you know, you will see I do lots of posts sharing my own story, but I don't slate my ex-husband because I take responsibility for what happened to me, equally so. And it's really important that we do that, you know, that we find a way to look within and heal our wounds, as opposed to projecting outwardly onto the narcissist and trying to get them to change. But clearly, recently, things have been triggering my ex because I got a barrage of text messages at about midnight last night as well, to which I didn't reply to and didn't respond to, because actually I feel real compassion, because we've been split up 11 years now. And if he wants to stalk me on social media and sit there, for me, yeah, I feel sad for him and his family for doing all of that, because I wish them well and I wish them happiness and that they can go and get on with whatever they want to get on with. But I am absolutely still going to continue to educate, to inspire, to show you what I went through from my perspective and what I felt like. And again, all of the stuff that I've shared in this episode, go and Google my name. You will see that magazine article as well. And you can read for yourself my response and his response to all of that too. But again, you know, obviously it did happen again. So of course I'm going to isolate myself. Of course my walls are going to come up. Why would they not? Why would I want to with anybody that was treating me like that? Just like for you, you know, if the narcissist in your life is abusing you psychologically, emotionally, financially, coercively, manipulating you, why would you ever want to be intimate with somebody like that? Yes, I know there's the other end, the polarized end of that. I'll do that in another episode. But many of you, clearly by the amount of comments on my social media around all of this, can totally relate to this as well. And I just want to say to you, there's nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. Your system is doing a wonderful job of trying to protect you and keep you safe. You're in survival mode. You're not thinking about anything else. Your system is like, not bothered about anything else. I just need to keep you alive, keep you safe, and in the least amount of pain. And that's what it thinks it is doing. That's why those parts are showing up for you. So I just really love to invite you to get curious about yourself. And I really hope talking about this uncomfortable subject, let's be honest, you know, because very often, you know, if you don't want to be intimate with your partner, then that can trigger your partner as well, because that triggers their wounds then of, well, hold on a second, am I not good enough? And then they might go and tell their mates or whatever, oh, she doesn't want to, and stuff. And that can actually perpetuate the problem, because it highlights even more, you're worthless, you're not good enough, you're not lovable, you're not important. It's all about me, so to speak. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are with all of this too. And I really hope that by talking about this uncomfortable subject, it really helps lift some of the guilt and shame that you may be feeling about how you felt too. Because I want you to know this is a freeze response. It's a protector part of you doing a wonderful, loving job of trying to keep you safe, but it's no way to live your life. And I just really want you to get curious, because as human beings, we are wired for connection. We are wired for love, but we are also wired to protect ourselves, to keep us safe, and to move us away from pain. So let me know what your thoughts are on all of this. It's a interesting episode, this maybe triggering for some people to hear, but I really hope that this has helped you understand it through a different lens, a more compassionate lens for yourself, because this isn't your fault, and you're only behaving in a way that your brain and body thinks is the best for you, but this is based on your interpretation of your own past experiences. Because let me tell you, you are enough, you are worthy, you are lovable, and you so matter. You so matter. If you feel like you don't any of those, that's come from your interpretation, from previous experiences. That's the bit that we need to work on. So when I'm working in my community, in my narcissistic trauma recovery program, and in one-to-ones, that's what we work on. Because if we work on those self-worthiness wounds, those protector parts don't need to be there then to protect you from feeling something that is no longer there for you. So lots of love. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. It's a triggering subject, maybe for many, but I feel like we need to talk about this because I want to lift the guilt and shame you might be feeling right now. So lots of love to you.